All right, episode 5.
Where do we begin?
Well, you had an idea. You said you wanted to dig deeper into
Oh
symbolic
yeah,
reality. Yeah.
right. I want to know more about your perspective on symbolic reality because I think that corresponds to what I refer to as an alternative reality. So I want to see what parts match and what part are, complementary between our two perspectives. And then inside of the symbolic reality is symbolic meaning. And so I'm wanting to know more about what that is from your perspective, and particularly what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Because these aren't just abstract ideas; they're abstractions of reality. They're the words that we're using and the concepts that belong to the words. They represent something that's real in day-to-day life, which is where philosophy actually can have value, is as a way to have a better understanding and a more effective way of navigating our day-to-day lives. And so I'm always interested in, when we're talking about philosophical concepts or theoretical concepts, what do those look like in our day-to-day lives? So that's what I was asking about.
I think if we just use a simple example, I think we can kind of break it down into 4 layers, right? If you just think about, just take a throne, right? A golden throne, a king's throne.
Yeah.
So you have like the first level of reality is just your physical perception of the object, right?
Uh-huh.
Light bounces object off the object. Your eyes pick it up and it recreates the image in your head,
Uh-huh.
right? So that's the first layer. It's just the physical appearance of something, and then you could say, well, we're human beings. We're intelligent. We give labels to things and nomenclatures, right? So we could say,
Right.
well, that's a chair, right? And so not only
So
does
we have names. We have names for the things the physical things that we perceive.
right. And
Yeah.
so there's like the physical perception. There's like a nomenclature, like a name, a symbolic name for it, or label.
Uh-huh.
There's a cognitive or conceptual understanding of its function. It's to sit in, right?
Uh-huh.
That gets added into it, and then you could say the fourth layer is like its cultural significance. Like what value do we apply to it culturally? So a throne would be like it's like a sacred chair, right? It's a king's chair.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's like a lot of value, that we invest or we project
Right.
on to that form of chair.
We imbue significance to it, as in
Right.
value.
Yeah.
And then that corresponds to my perspective around the duality of, it's good or it's bad, or it's meaningless. Because I see that we have this kind of 3-part filter that when we look at life, we always we tend to just look at life in terms of the 3 filters. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's terrible. That's nothing. But those are all value judgments, right?
Yeah, I think that's like a normal biological thing, right? That's something I
I
want
think
to
so.
eat or something I want to fuck. It's like just neutral, nothing at all, or it's something I have to
Yeah.
be afraid of because it might be a danger to me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I guess that's the same way when you're interacting in the cultural environment. This is going to be beneficial to my self-esteem and my sense of meaning and purpose. This provides me no value whatsoever. It's neutral, or this person is threatening to me. It's threatening to my
Yeah.
identity, right?
Or,
And so
or in
it
the
kinda
case of
works
the
the same way.
metaphor of the throne, uh, you go through those 3 possibilities of the meaning and significance of it, right? Of
Yeah.
the
Well, it
of the
has
throne.
as sort of a negative
That's a good
meaning.
metaphor. Because I can get it about that. Okay, it's just a thing, and it just is what it is. You know, that, and we can perceive what is as what is. Like as an object or something, but then we assign or imbue that, oh, this is a great thing, or oh, this is a terrible thing, or this is a non-thing, right? That's the next thing that can happen. And I think this is an intellectual function. But we do this so reflexive, as you would say, so automatically that we're not even aware of that the meaning we assign to the chair is to the thing. The meaning we assign to the thing, in this case the throne, is ours. We're the source of that. We think, we have a tendency to think that that chair has that value intrinsic to the chair. But that's the whole, I forget which philosopher it was that sponsored the concept of nihilism, of life is meaningless, right? As if we begin to recognize, wait a minute, the chair isn't sacred in and of itself. It's sacred because I define it that way.
Right.
Therefore, the chair is just the chair and doesn't mean anything. Therefore, life doesn't mean anything.
Well, meaning is real. It's created by the culture and it's created by
well,
human beings.
or I think ultimately where it resides is subjectively. But I agree
Right.
that I think that's very significant. That subjective reality, it is real. It's just not the totality of reality.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't get like the whole meaning doesn't exist thing, because of course it exists because people respond to it. So it definitely exists. It's just man-made.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some meaning that is in our DNA, or it's in our biology, and it has like an evolutionary function and was selected by natural selection, right?
Yeah.
Because you have different reward systems in the brain. You have serotonin and dopamine
Right.
and stuff like that, and certain behaviors.
So that would be more biological meaning rather than symbolic meaning.
But we hijack our biological systems, to use in our symbolic reality. So our symbolic reality can, initiate some sort of chemical response in our brain, the same as,
right.
Something, of lower species, Yeah.
Yeah, and you said a moment ago when you were laying this thing out, symbolic reality, and you're saying there were like, I think 3 levels or 4 levels or something, but one of them you said function, and that's something that I've been keenly aware of in my contemplation and reflection and whatnot. It is what I would call functional meaning. So it's what something means in karma, in cause and effect. And the reality of that everything is, evolving and becoming. And well, I'm on a tangent there a little bit. Back up. Like the chair, its usefulness. We can sit on it. We can stand on it. We can make it pretty and admire it. Those are all functional meanings. The meaning of the chair in terms of how does it work, what does it do. So that's a functionality meaning that I think belongs to what you were saying, like the biological, evolutionarily selected biological meaning is based on how did it work. I eat this, I get sick. So the meaning of that berry is it's not good, right?
That's an interesting. If we add a 5th layer there, you can add the aesthetic.
Say again? Say again?
Remember I said the 4 layers of reality, right? I guess there's a 5th layer in there from what you just said, and you can call it the aesthetic layer, right? Because aesthetics would be different than the value, being sacred or something like that, because beauty is something different. Otto Rank talks a lot about like the experience of beauty and aesthetics, and how beauty in itself can provide a sense of meaning. And so he talks about having a diversified aesthetic portfolio, developing in yourself the ability to take aesthetic pleasure out of a wide range of different media as possible.
Well, like I'm sitting here looking out the window, and the wildflowers on the knoll across the driveway here from us are just an intense yellow gold. And so the yellow is so yellow, it's beautiful. And I wonder when the squirrels sit on the rock and look over that way, I wonder if they're having a similar visceral response to what they see, just that vivid color. right? It might turn out the squirrels are colorblind, in which case it probably wouldn't apply. But it's like how primal is our sense of aesthetics.
I think aesthetics, like what we talked about last time, like aesthetics, empathy, compassion, you know, are functions of consciousness. I think so. I think as consciousness grows and expands, so does the aesthetic experience. So does curiosity. So does compassion and empathy. Right. So I
Yeah,
think it's a function of consciousness. I think squirrels have consciousness, and so do dogs and stuff like that. So I assume that there's some level of aesthetic experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
there could be some form of that. That also reminds me of Dr. Buck's work with in the book called Cosmic Consciousness, and he talks about the various levels of awareness, and particularly self-consciousness, or levels of consciousness that throughout the history of man, our level of consciousness has changed. It has elevated or expanded, but we're still becoming, I would say, consistent with what Dr. Buck presented in the book, is that our consciousness is still evolving. It's still becoming more conscious, our consciousness. And then what you're saying is that aesthetics is one of the things that has happened along the way, that we have a fairly sophisticated level of consciousness of uh, of aesthetics, of well, of course, aesthetics can be a bit of an esoteric term, but beauty, awe, whatever that is. That when I look at the wildflowers across the driveway, or the a sunset, a particularly vivid and dramatic sunset, the sound of music, those different. There's a quickening that happens that you're saying is a function of how our consciousness has evolved, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know, buddy. So, like, I think that there are properties like imbued in consciousness, right? And so, it's really tricky when you're talking about like reality and consciousness and stuff like that, because if I'm a betting man, and I'm betting on what the base mode of reality is.
Uh huh.
A materialist would say energy or matter, and I would say consciousness, right? So I think the base mode of reality is mind, and we're living in somewhat of a dream, right?
Uh
So
huh.
we're living in the mind of God, and God is having a dream, whatever you want to say God is, right? And
Uh huh.
so the base mode is consciousness, right? So if I'm dreaming, right, and inside my dream there's this jug of water, right? So that jug of water is of consciousness, right? Because it's in my dream and I'm having a conscious experience, and so that's a piece of consciousness that's in my dream, even though this jug of water doesn't have any agency or self-awareness itself within my dream, right?
Right.
Same as like in normal waking reality, like I think everything that is a function of consciousness is consciousness in itself, right? But lacks
Yeah.
self-awareness, and it takes like sort of a computational or cognitive system in order for consciousness to be able to perceive itself or something like that, right?
Yeah. All right.
So, yeah. So I think the base mode is consciousness, and consciousness has properties, that are imbued in it, that are separate from our biological sort of systems, right? And so as we become more aware and more have the greater capacity within the organism to perceive consciousness, to perceive ourselves or the base mode, we sort of can take on some of the properties and feel them as part of ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
so,
We identify them as a part of ourself. We see them as ourself. Is
right.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think like there's some like this curiosity. Yeah, the things I said are curiosity, compassion, sort of aesthetic, beauty, all these sort of things. I think that these are, if there's 1,000 different species with the same intelligence as us, I think they would all have the same capacity to, to sort of have these attributes, because I think they're a fundamental aspect of consciousness.
Yeah, because they're part of the model of base mode of reality as consciousness. Then all this that you're saying would be a part of that model.
Right, but our organisms all mixed in too, like this, like the serotonin and dopamine, and all the different neurotransmitters and stuff. It's all sort of mixed in, blended together with consciousness, right? And so we have a uniquely human experience,
Yeah.
But yeah.
But then I'm sensing that we may be leaving our phantom audience behind here, because you're getting pretty deep here into territory that's not commonly discussed, and it's probably not part of the paradigm of most people that would be watching our podcast. But let's see if we can tie it back to. So what does all that look like? What are some manifestations or examples of what you just said that we would encounter on a day-to-day basis?
So if I want to try to have like an experience of mind, right, of consciousness, I could pay close attention to all the different personalities that inhabit my mind from the point I wake up to when I go to sleep, right?
Personalities of yourself?
Right. Well, if you think about it, if you wake up and you're hungry, right, you say, I'm hungry. You identify with hunger, right?
I am.
Yeah.
I am hungry. Hungry is me.
Yeah, and then you eat, I am full. You horny,
Now you're not
I
that
am horny, right?
You're not that hungry being anymore. Now you become a different being.
Right. So each of these I ams throughout the day represent a different part of the brain, right? And they have a completely different personality. Like when you're angry or tired or hungry or something like that. And so you're always switching in and out of different modes and completely different personalities, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like your sense of identity should be switching along with them, but it remains consistent throughout the entire day. So you never feel yourself to be changing, even though you can see your personalities are changing a lot throughout the day. There's a whole bunch of different, Buddhists would call it minds. You have a lot of different minds in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so if you really want to try to see what mind is, you can realize that it's easily to mistake consciousness with the content of consciousness, right? Because consciousness is almost.
Now wait a minute. Say that again, because I think that's a pretty big concept that you just put on the table.
Yes.
Say it again.
So it's really easy to confuse consciousness with the content of consciousness. Right?
Okay.
So when you're having the self feeling, when you feel yourself as Jason or whatever, right? You're actually switching through a bunch of different personalities throughout the day, and if you can see, okay, the one thing that remains consistent is a sense of I, a sense of identity, this subjective sort of thing, right? And it's easily to confuse this sense of I with just pure consciousness, with the limbic system or the hunger or the sex drive or whatever. And these things are making noise.
Now the hunger is that is the content of consciousness, and the I is conscious of that content.
Right. So we feel ourselves to be like there's no difference between consciousness and the content of consciousness, because there's this so there's different like cognitive functions, right, within human beings.
Right.
Like if you think about it, like one part, like you could scan the room, right? You're looking around, and then another part can like take like say this like GoPro, and it's like, okay, I can focus on it. So there's like scanning, there's a focus on it, and then there's yet another mind that can examine it, logically. What does it do? What does this function, right? And so you have all these various minds or cognitive processes that are all running simultaneously, right? But you have the experience of a singular sort of identity, a singular phenomena, right? That's able to blend all these things into a unified experience when they're clearly separate cognitive functions, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that other thing is the sort of compulsion to identify with, right? To grab onto, to latch onto, and that's what Buddhists are always talking about. How you're attached to something, you're attached to your identity, right?
So now that's attachment. You're identifying with, being attached with the content or object of consciousness, or object of awareness. Is that a fair synonym?
I like content of consciousness. Yeah,
Yeah,
to me, that
content.
makes,
And so when we see that content as ourself, is a distinctly different situation than when we see ourselves as the observer.
right. Yeah, or
And then there's that
experiencer.
trippy,
Yeah.
there's that trippy place where you can observe yourself as the observer. You can observe your observing.
In high dose, like psychedelic experiences, people experience this thing called ego death, right? Where they feel like everything that they've ever identified with about themselves is gone, it's dead, it's meaningless, right?
Yeah.
And yet their point of awareness remains, right?
Right.
And so they're like, in a deep psychedelic experience, you can actually experience yourself as separate from all the content, you know?
Yeah.
And you feel like your sense of self or identity transcends like your actual biological organism that you're in right now.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty trippy. But again, I think it's for the vast majority of people who might come across our podcast, these would be pretty far out, far out, man.
Yeah, these are our conversations, so that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And but let's come back then to where we were, to you expanding on the layers, whatever those layers were that had to do with symbolic reality. You were kind of laying that out, explaining the content of what you see there. And then I also wanted to go into the hearing more about what you have to say on the symbolic meaning.
Can we read the first little paragraph of the thing you sent me? Because I think it's kind of related to what we're talking about, and then we can kind of get into that.
Yeah. What's the title of that thing I sent to you?
Existence and function of meaning.
The existence and function of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And so this is a real short little essay that I wrote in explaining to myself what I saw about meaning in terms of its existence and how meaning functions, which I think is directly related to what you had said so far. So yeah, we can go into that.
All right, I just want to read there's just the first two lines here. Okay, it says, how do we establish that just because we create, it's not God creating it? Seems to me that creating, causing to come into existence, is a functional essence of any form of deity, and that we cannot be separated from the creation process.
All right. So now when I hear you read that, I'm totally lost. It's like, so what the hell? What was that? And those are my own words. And when I just recently, before I sent it to you, I stumbled across it and I read it, and it made sense to me when I was reading it. So read that again and see. Maybe my ADD kicked in there and I wasn't paying attention.
It says, how do we establish that just because we create it, it's not God creating it? It's like, so if we create something like a new symbol, a new cultural meaning, how do we establish that it's not actually God creating it?
Yeah,
and
right.
It seems to me that creating, so the process of creation, bringing into existence from nothing, right?
Yeah.
Causing to come into existence is a functional essence of any deity, right?
The functional essence of what?
Any deity,
Oh
right?
yeah, deity of any kind of God. I mean, God seems like what's universal about gods is that they create.
Yeah, so
You
we are the
know,
gods of the cultural realm or the symbolic realm, right? It's because,
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
like,
Those are all mental concepts or images that we create to understand what's going on out there.
yeah,
Like
not,
where you know where did it all come from, and also the mystery. I think that it's God is a way to understand what cannot be understood. It gives us a symbolic understanding of the mystery of life that we don't know,
yeah.
but we can create these symbolic representations of what's going on as a way to satisfy our intellectual itch to understand.
And
Anyway, that's where I'm coming from, and I use the word there. That God created it. Also, it had to do at that time when I wrote that. Um, you know, I was working at finding a source of absolute, and so God was the concept that I used to refer to something that is absolute. The water's wet and rocks are hard, right? And so, whereas at that time I didn't understand that I didn't recognize the absoluteness of what we create, but I was aware of the fact that there was something more salient or substantive about the subjective reality that we create, meaning in this case, right? That there was something there about meaning, even if we didn't see it as that God created the meaning. And so that was part of my own questioning that was involved with the writing of this paper.
Yeah, I mean, even if there is no God, you have an infinite universe, probably, right? And you've got these programmed in whatever mode that they exist in, laws of physics and biology and chemistry that exist, and I'm not sure what way, that interact, in a way that create biological organisms and then create the process of evolution and natural selection and DNA and all that kind of shit, which
Yeah,
creates, a state of consciousness, and that consciousness comes up with symbolic and cultural meaning systems and stuff like that. And
right.
so, like, if the playing out of reality is the closest as it comes to God, or the playing out of physics and chemistry and biology, then you could say any meaning system that we create culturally is just a function of the same thing, and of
Right.
therefore an act of God.
Yeah, it's like uh well, I guess we kind of, if I'm following you here, it's kind of like the whole God way of understanding it is that the everything that's created that isn't created by man is created by God, but what man creates isn't created by God, and there's a separation. uh, we this has to do with perception, right? And we see it as separate. It's like God didn't write that paper. Arlen wrote that paper.
Mm-hmm.
And but if the paper appeared mysteriously and there was no evidence of where it came from, it's like, well, okay, it must be God. Back to the mystery part. Anyway, I'm on a tangent here. Let's come back to you're wanting to discuss the content of that essay.
Well, yeah, I thought it came. It was so you wanted to know more. I'm already lost. So
Okay.
I thought it would bring us more close to what we were talking about before, but it kind of took us off in another direction, I guess.
Well, I think it is related, and that would be a good thing to kind of tether to. Is as we're looking at the content of the paper, um, what's this content's connection to symbolic reality, or the it's more likely to be related to what's inside of symbolic reality is symbolic meaning, because the paper is about the existence of meaning and the function of that existence, the function of meaning, and that would necessarily cross reality with your concept of a symbolic meaning, because that's a type of meaning.
It kind of
And
reminds me of like when you're thinking about the difference between something that's natural or something that's artificial, right?
yeah,
To where, well, if you really think about it, there's no such thing as artificial, right? Because we're animals, and if we make it, it's a process of our own nature, right? And so everything is
yeah,
nature. But
and, I, and
we like to make a distinction between man-made and nature as being artificial and natural, right?
well, yeah, and that's part of that duality thing that is part of the ancient teachings, is the level of consciousness that can be identified by duality, and the separation of subject and object. And so, for me, just my own personal experience of how all this is put together, reality is put together, is that everything I do is God doing it. It's just I'm the agent of that creative process. God as the creator.
Right.
And so I created, first my brain creates these thoughts, and then I create a paper, that I type out that captures those thoughts into code symbols on a page, that that experience that I was having, right? But I created all of that, but to me that's not separate from nature,
Right.
or it's not separate from God as the creator. That duality, that separateness, I think is hugely significant functionally. I'm talking about functional meaning here when I say that it's hugely significant, is that it has a very big impact on the quality of human existence when we don't see ourselves as an uh, an intrinsic part or integral part of nature, of God, the source of everything. That we can't not be a part of the creative process of the universe evolving.
Yeah. If you think about it, like if you just think about it from a materialistic point of view, it's like I don't know. I don't think that. I think there's probably an infinite number of Big Bangs, but in this Big Bang, right? If you think about whatever happened during the Big Bang, started like these chains, these casual chains of cause and effect, right? Which
Yeah,
create more and more and more and more and more, like a tree, an infinite tree spreading out, right? And they come back
right.
in and they intertwine and stuff like that, and they create,
Uh-huh.
you like your
Yeah,
just your body and your behavior, every breath you take, just moving forward in the state of time right now is the pinnacle or the, what is it called? The head of the snake, the I don't know what you would call it, the head of the spear of not a thousand, but an infinite number of casual chains of cause and effect, all
yeah,
interacting with
yeah.
each other
A
in this
net,
moment to create this
a
phenomena. Yeah,
network of cause and effect.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Piercing a new sort of path into space time. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here is um, the duality thing, because I saw that as a very practically, very significant on a practical level, of when we can't see ourselves as integral to nature. So back to the concept of the artificial. Yeah, it's naturally artificial. It's by nature that it is. Artificial has a particular set of qualities to it. So we're referring to those qualities to something that we call those artificial, but it's it's not separate from what naturally occurs.
Right. Yeah.
Everything that occurs is integral to nature.
Yeah, and you can
It's for
you look
me.
at
I
that
mean
like yeah. No, I think that's
that's
true.
my view of
That
it.
seems factually correct. And whether you look at it from a materialistic point of view or even from like a idealist point of view, whether if you're acting on within the mind of God and you're composed of the mind of God, anything you do is also of God, right? And so
Yeah, for me,
yeah,
that's how I see it.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
seems yeah.
So that's a little bit of a tangent to our main discussion point theme, but I think it warranted taking a few moments there to elaborate on that because that might resonate with some of our viewers.
There's
But let's
another
go
layer
back.
to the God thing though too.
Say again.
I think there's another layer I think to um, the feeling of deity or the feeling of godness in the process of creation, cultural like meaning creation or art
Yeah.
or anything like that.
Yeah.
And Otto Rock talks about that too. We talked about it before about the magic word, right?
Uh huh.
And so naming everything, giving everything a definition, and understanding the function of everything
Yeah.
is sort of us recreating the world for ourselves symbolically and conquering the natural world, right? To giving our sense of a self a sense of power over the world by recreating it for ourselves symbolically.
Yeah.
And
So
so
then,
yeah,
so at that juncture there, then we're we we create symbolic meaning um, that for better or worse, because some symbolic meaning enhances our ability to navigate the reality, the world, and it enhances us our effectiveness, our survival, our thriving. Certainly, aesthetics is part of thriving, so that we create a symbolic component to reality that we're the source of that that symbolic component, and that in some ways is a good thing. It's wholesome and it enhances the quality of our existence. It gives us a more wholesome existence. But in other ways, that same process of symbolic meaning can go in an entirely different direction. I would say most wars are probably examples of it going off the rails of well-being into this destructive. It's generally viewed that nobody wins a war. That everybody loses.
well, there is
But
such thing as bloodlust too.
well, yeah, but and that the lust part of the bloodlust would be part of the attraction. But I'm just saying that the symbolic meanings that we create do have different. They're not all they're not all the same. Some of them are much more wholesome and contribute to surviving and thriving, and others contribute to self-destruction as well as destruction of other. Right?
Yeah, but
And
sometimes destruction of other can, benefit us.
well,
Can help us
so
thrive.
what would be the an example of the benefit of destruction of other?
Yeah, but you have to separate we're going to separate ethics from biology or whatever, right? So you in your mind you have this sense of truth about what ought to be in terms of your own ethics and
Yeah,
morality, right?
that would be the ethics or morality. But
Then
biologically,
right.
which I think biology stays real close to function. So biological meaning would be functional meaning. I think generally there might be some exceptions that I'm not aware of. But in terms of biology,
Hold on, let me finish my answer to the question because you asked me a question there.
yeah,
Yeah, so and I'm just saying, so just taking the perspective on human beings as if like we are a higher species looking at how chimps behave, right? So if we look at ourselves like chimps, like there's no good and evil or anything like that. It's just nature and the way the species behaves, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so one extra part of our species, but beyond the biological getting food and we need our
Yeah.
territory and stuff like that, is
Right.
this cultural stuff, right? We need meaning and significance because we've got this, we're in this really strange period of evolution, right, where we have existential terror and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Right.
but so in a sense, having an external sort of repository for our own angst and fear and terror and stuff like that, that we can go out and we can actively destroy, has an anxiety buffering effect, right? And so when cultural meaning systems in the affirmation aren't enough to give
So
us,
you're saying that the benefit, the biological benefit, is relieving the existential angst.
right, by projecting it onto another group of people, and then
Yeah.
in the attempt to destroy that other group,
But then what?
relieves
But
anxiety.
then, so that's a little bit like I had a tough day at the work. I'll go to the bar and get drunk tonight. And yeah, you go to the bar, you get drunk, you have a good time. But then there's the morning after, the night before, or in the case of being destructive, as a way to alleviate symbolic angst, is that now we have created for this other power force called the enemy. We have created over there their existential angst to come back and retaliate against us.
Right, it's a symbiotic relationship
Yeah, but
of
to
mutual
me,
destruction.
but to me, what that looks like to me is a fool's game, because it's a symbiotic. You're really right about symbiotic, because the people who hate each other need each other to hate each other.
Yeah,
And so it comes down to what kind of human being do I want to be, and how prevalent is that? Because my belief is that gradually there are more and more people who want peace, love, and understanding than people who want to go and perpetuate the symbiotic relationship of death and destruction.
yeah, but there's a lot of people who, they want peace and love, and they turn into hippies and stuff like that, and they just want everyone to get along, and they feel themselves to be pure, right? And then they recognize that a utopia is possible, right? Everyone can just get along and be loving and kind to each other if it just wasn't for this other group of people over here. You know what I mean? Who are screwing it all up. You know what I mean? And all we got to do, we are loving, we are understanding and peaceful, but temporarily we'll be vicious, destroy this group of people, kill them all, right? And then, we can have our utopia, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, like Ernest Becker says, man commits his greatest evils trying to escape from evil. It's like the most dangerous thing that is the morally pure, the evolved, the peace and love and all this kind of stuff, because it so quickly becomes like this psychotic, urge to murder shitloads of people,
Well, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole on this one, but the sign over the door of the rabbit hole says something about that there's a there's a whole other angle on what's going on in that illustration of what you're saying. But meanwhile, I'm just saying, for me personally, so far as I know, human consciousness is evolving in a direction of what we would generally think. I think a lot of people, or maybe most people, would generally think. We refer to the direction as being more wholesome, and also wiser, more, not as short-sighted and neurotic. The less neurotic way of being in the world. And that three characteristics of that way of being in the world is peace, love, and understanding. But in order to do peace, love, and understanding, we are going to have to evolve past the illustration that you just, with the hippies, with The idea of peace, love, and understanding was great until they misunderstood. I would say they misunderstood that they have, in your scenario, not hippies in general, but in your scenario, they come to this realization, wait a minute, we can't do peace, love, and understanding unless we get rid of those people over there, which is what we've got going on politically right now. And we have to get rid of them in order for us to do our version of living rightly. And basically there's a huge absence of personal agency in that scenario, because I can live as peacefully and as understandingly and as lovingly as I'm capable of doing, regardless of anything around me.
Yeah, but at any point, you and I and anyone else has the capacity, no matter how evolved we get into love and consciousness, to revert into a state of like murderous rage, or have the ability to consent to genocide.
We don't. Yeah,
that capacity
exactly.
exists with us.
I would agree.
Both potentials for love, kindness, all this kind of stuff exist simultaneously as our potential for murder and madness and genocide. And so
now we're back to which wolf do you feed?
Right, but I think you have to like Jung talks a lot about the shadow self, right? You have to get to know your shadow self.
Yeah.
You have to imagine the scenario where you can actually be convinced that a group of people should be wiped off the face of the earth. You have to confine your own consenting person to genocide, or your own murderous person, because it exists within all of us.
Yeah.
And you have to pay careful attention to that, and you have to understand that no matter how far you think you get, that potential is always there. And so that's part of this whole thing is keeping an eye on that,
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. So let's come back up to, is there anything further on the paper that you wanted to discuss?
I don't know. I thought that first part was pretty good, and it kind of related to...
Yeah, we got into theology a lot with that first sentence.
Well, when you think about creation, what is creativity? What is creating cultural meaning systems? And what does it mean to be able to create symbolic reality? Right? It's pretty interesting. And then if you get like deeper into it and try to understand like what is the process of creation in itself, like the world coming into existence from a void or something like that, and how much of what we do in our everyday lives is just an extension of that process, just another end of that flow.
We can't,
right? Yeah.
We can't not make a difference. It's like all the people that are not watching this podcast, and like forever, never watched it, okay? They're making a difference by not watching it. Now, I don't expect people to understand what I just said, recognize what I just said. But that I can see that. When I would do workshops and we get on this particular topic of you can't not make a difference, there I would use the illustration of all the people who aren't here at our workshop and therefore aren't going to bring that energy that they would bring. That energy is not here. So that they're creating the absence of their energy in this room by not being here. And all of the things that they would say and contribute and the insights that we would get from what they say, we won't get those insights from them. We may not get those insights at all today because, that's the natural consequences of them not being here. So the people who aren't here with us today, they're contributing to this workshop. They're part of what this workshop is going to become by not being here. And, some people, their eyes just kind of glaze over, a deer in the headlights, and other people, they get these ahas. And a lot of times we have a pretty edifying discussion around that concept of that we can't not make a difference, even by not acting. It's the creativity of omission.
Okay, can we get into one of the most profound things I've ever heard you say? And one of the things I gotten the most benefit out of is when you talk about the difference between being at cause and being at effect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, So what you're saying is, no matter what you do, there's all these new casual chains of cause and effect that are emanating from you at every moment, right? And
Yeah.
they're gonna last for infinity into the world, right? So that's like the
Exactly.
imprint
I mean,
we live,
we can't
right?
not, yeah, we can't not make a
And
difference.
so you can do so passively. You can try to, live as instinctually as possible, reflexively. Don't think for yourself. Somebody else to create your meaning systems for you, tell you what to do, and all that kind of stuff. And you're still making a difference. All those casual chains are emanating from you, no matter what.
Right.
Or you can take, a conscious approach and try to get some sort of like bearings or control over this fucking bull that you're on of like of human will and motivation and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And try
yeah.
to direct your life in a certain direction, and have some sort of effect on the quality and type of casual chains that are emanating from your existence,
Well, here, all right, hang on a second here. For me, from my perspective, what I can see is that in so many instances, we are God's agent. And what I mean by that is that we decide, just me, like right now, choosing my words and deciding to make the comment that I'm working at making here. I'm making that choice. Yeah, in a sense, that's God, that's God in me making the choice. But I'm deciding what my intention is about what I say. And from that intention, I will make choices about how well I say what I'm saying. So in that sense, we are part of the cosmic, divine, creative process. We are the chooser because we choose what we do with our creative process, either consciously or passively, unconsciously, right? And being at cause, shifting from being at the effect of the circumstances of our life, which is the kind of the epitome of the reflexivity, that it's just automatic, and that we're just part of the effect. Or in those moments that we're awake and we can say, wait a minute, I can decide how I'm going to respond to this. Then we're deciding that eternal consequence of our action. And to me, that's huge.
Yeah.
In fact, I could
The difference between the living and the dead, in my opinion.
I could easily get into an intoxicated state of dopamine just thinking about the profoundness of that choice. Not just me, but all of us. We have the ability to choose to be the chooser, which is shifting from being at effect to being at cause with the circumstances. Being at the effect of circumstances, shifting over to being at the effect, being at the cause with the circumstances. The cause of our action, the cause of the outcome, the cause of our response, but within the circumstances. We don't get to control what's on the menu. We get to control which meal we order. Yeah. And that's the meal we order is our response to the options that are on the menu. And that's the essence of that thing you were saying about shifting from being at effect to being at cause. But when we do that, that difference that we can't not make then takes form at our will. We choose, to some degree, we choose what form that effect is going to be. What we create. We choose the form of it. And so for some people, that would be a level of personal responsibility that would be mind-blowing and probably not a good idea to dwell on too much. But
I think it's important to say, though, it's important to say that we're always approaching the ability to be at cause, right? Because we are instinctual animals, and it is a very slippery thing to get a hold of, but we're always approaching that goal that we never actually reach, I think. Yeah.
That's an appropriate caveat you're putting there, because this doesn't mean we're in control.
Right.
It means that we can influence, we can participate. To some degree, we can can tweak our reaction to the circumstances, and so we can participate in the creation of reality, of the universe, right? We can participate, but we don't ever have control. We don't even have control over ourselves. So
a good analogy would be like if life is a wave, right? You can either tumble in it uncontrolled, or you can surf it, right?
well, or you,
Yeah.
but
They're
sometimes,
still going, the same direction
right? You
in
can.
time. Yeah.
In fact, I would say that one of the main characteristics of maturing as a human being is learning how to surf the circumstances, the wave of circumstances on our board of agency,
Yeah.
and to learn how to do that. And so at 80 years, of having been learning how to do that, and I can say this is what I've learned so far, is that it works sometimes.
That's the hero's journey, in my opinion. If there's anything worth doing in life, I think it's probably that.
Learning how to surf the board of agency.
Trying to get some sort of control over this consciousness stream, and it's casual chains that emanate from it, and give it some purposeful direction. Because as humans beings, like, we can actually chart our own evolutionary trajectory if we actually pay attention to our behavior.
Well, I agree, but I also caution against about to some degree, we can chart our destiny.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're always approaching that you never reach, right? So it's
but we're working.
Yeah.
We can work at it, because to be the chooser is a choice. So we can't not be the chooser. To not make a choice is to make a choice, and sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't be the chooser. And sometimes, especially if the horse is running in the direction I want to go, I'm just going to hang on and ride it. I don't need to change the direction. If I'm up on the board and the wave is working and whatnot, I don't need to intervene. I'll just ride it. But then there's other times when it's not going in a direction that, to the best of my understanding, it is what serves well-being, serves my well-being. But for me personally, it has to serve well-being generally in order for it to serve my well-being. And if it's not, to my best understanding, it's not going that direction, then I'll look for how to intervene, how to exercise my agency to tilt the board this way or that way, so that we can keep the ride going.
Another way to look at it,
the
is
well-being.
like, you can look at it like, it's the legacy that outlives you is all the casual chains that you leave behind, and they'll live for infinity, right? And so you have somewhat of control over your own immortality, right? And what kind of impact do you want to leave after you're dead, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
now that coming back to symbolic, right? Is that symbolic meaning? Is that symbolic immortality, or is that literal, actual immortality?
Well, it's an essence, like a part of you that actually physically persists after you, because that's all the, if I drop this on the table, right? It hits the table, it depletes a little bit of energy, it moves the air. That chain goes on for infinity. It never ends, right? And so, like, our entire existence, we're creating all these chains of cause and effect. Some of them are neutral, some of them are bad, some of them good, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what legacy do I want to leave behind? What casual change?
Which wolf do you want to feed?
Right. Well, I mean,
factor. Which wolf do you want to feed?
It physically outlives you, so there's some physical, essence of the fact that you existed that live.
Well,
on.
now you're talking biologically, like with my children and my grandchildren.
Yeah, biologically and physically, just the interactions.
Yeah.
Socially.
But then also, what about intellectual? Because intellectual reality, symbolic reality, That's a real thing, and we can tell it's real because it has a footprint. We can see the effects of it. And like with you, one of the really cool things about our relationship is that I've had the kind of impact intellectually on you. You just alluded to an example of that, right? But I've had the kind of intellectual effect on you that will outlive my presence here in the physical form. So to me, that is another form of literal immortality, not just symbolic immortality.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
the whole you picked up on the cause, living at cause instead of effect, and you're using that, and you're demonstrating that to people who are pick up on, squirrels do, squirrel see, squirrel do, monkey see, monkey do. Jason does, Jason learns, right? The other Jason, right? So even if you don't express it intellectually, it still influences your behavior and contributes in that way, and that's still part of my immortality. But then you being a philosopher, you incorporate that piece of information into your intellect, and as you just said, that one of the things that stands out. And so I think that we're talking about a very definite, observable fact of immortality that's not symbolic.
on a lot of different levels. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not just symbolic.
Right.
I think it fits more to which one of which group of meanings does it belong to? I know it. I mean, it can belong to symbolic meaning, but it can also be a part of literal, functional. Yeah, functional meaning, cause and effect. And so I live on, and for me, that is just a really far out cool thing to be able to recognize that. I don't necessarily know what happens in terms of my consciousness after my heart stops beating, and I reach the state of reality that we call dead, and there's a lot I don't know about that, but I'm comfortable with the knowledge, or believing that I know that what I have imparted to others will continue for eternity. That.
Well, eventually, the sun will go supernova, and all history on Earth will be obliterated, and
Yeah, so there may be the limit of within human existence. It'll go on for as long as there's human existence, but
hopefully
yeah.
we'll be a multi-planetary species by then, and we'll be out in Star Trek mode.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe, but yeah. So we're coming up here on an hour and a half here on this one, and
it was pretty jam-packed too. It wasn't as long, but it was a lot to.
Yeah. But it sounds like that paper might have some other things worth kind of kicking around within the basic framework of the symbolic reality. That's kind of our macro topic here. And then inside of symbolic reality, there are all these other things to talk about, the nature of symbolic reality. And today we focused on somewhat on symbolic meaning, the meaning and significance that we create to symbols and things that represent. But I think that this is a very practical and useful realm of the human psyche to explore and to talk about, and maybe offer explanation that could be edifying to our viewers. That kind of like you know, somewhere in one of our conversations, I talked about shifting from living at the effect of circumstances to living at cause with circumstances.
Right.
You know, and that has turned out to make a big difference for you. And then also for me, you know, that the fact that it makes a difference to you makes a difference to me. And that kind of thing, I think, can happen for our viewers as we discuss, you know, kick these things around.
So, yeah, let's cut it right there then. I think that's a good episode.
A good breaking point.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Share, comment. We want to hear some comments, questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us, if any of you are out there that aren't phantoms, let us know that you're out there.
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye everybody.